What if India vanished from the world map tomorrow? It sounds like a wild, impossible scenario, but think about it for just a moment. Which countries would suddenly collapse, unable to survive without India's support? You see, India is often talked about as a rising global power, the fastest growing major economy, a military giant, a hub of technology and culture. But here's the truth most people don't realize. India is not just rising for itself. It's quietly holding up the stability, security, and survival of several nations around it. Without India, their economies would crumble, their lights would go out, their borders would be threatened, and their very independence could be at risk. Why? Because India plays multiple roles at once. It's an economic lifeline, trading partner, and job provider. It's a security shield protecting smaller nations from external threats. It's a cultural anchor tied to shared traditions, religion, and values. And it's a humanitarian first responder, the country that rushes aid, medicine, and resources when disaster strikes. In today's video, we're uncovering the 5 countries that would collapse without India's presence. From Afghanistan, where India built schools and hospitals, to Nepal and Bhutan, whose economies and electricity grids are linked to India. From Bangladesh, which relies on India for trade and energy, to the Maldives, which depends on India for security and survival, these nations prove that India isn't just powerful, it's indispensable. By the end of this video, you'll see a side of India rarely discussed, not just a regional giant, but a lifeline holding entire nations together. So let us dive into the shocking list of 5 countries that wouldn't stand a chance without India. 5. Afghanistan. When you think of Afghanistan, you might picture decades of conflict, international interventions, and instability. But behind the headlines, one nation has quietly been Afghanistan's lifeline for decades, and that's India. India is Afghanistan's largest regional donor of development aid, having poured billions of dollars into rebuilding the war-torn country. Unlike other powers who often focus only on military presence, India chose a different path, investing in people. Roads, schools, hospitals, dams, and even the Afghan parliament building in Kabul were constructed with Indian assistance. These projects weren't just infrastructure, they were symbols of hope, showing Afghans that someone cared about their future. Education has been another cornerstone. Thousands of Afghan students have studied in Indian universities on scholarships, returning home with skills that fuel Afghanistan's fragile economy. From doctors to engineers, India's investment in human capital created a generation of Afghan professionals who could rebuild their country. Strategically, India has also acted as a counterbalance to Pakistan's influence. While Pakistan often pursued its own narrow security interests, India became a trusted partner for the Afghan people. This gave Kabul an alternative, preventing it from being completely dependent on one neighbor's political and military agenda. Now, imagine Afghanistan without India. Its already fragile economy would collapse further. Education would crumble as scholarships dried up. Infrastructure projects would halt, leaving communities disconnected and underdeveloped. Most dangerously, the vacuum would allow external powers with less altruistic motives to dominate Afghanistan's destiny. In short, India's presence has been more than just aid. It has been the lifeline that kept Afghanistan connected to hope, progress, and independence. 4. Nepal. Nepal may be small in size, but its survival and stability are deeply intertwined with India. Let's start with trade. Nearly 70% of Nepal's trade passes through India, making New Delhi not just a neighbor but the gateway to the outside world. Everything from basic goods to industrial imports moves through Indian ports and roads before reaching Nepal. Without this, the Himalayan nation would be isolated. Energy is another vital connection. Nepal depends on India for fuel, electricity, and digital connectivity. While Nepal has hydropower potential, it's India that provides the investment, infrastructure, and most importantly, the customers. India imports Nepalese electricity and also supplies power back during shortages, a mutual lifeline. But the ties aren't just economic, the cultural and religious bond runs deep. Hinduism and Buddhism link the two nations spiritually, and millions of Nepalese work in India without needing a visa. Their remittances form a crucial part of Nepal's economy, keeping households afloat. When Nepal faced a devastating earthquake in 2015, it was India that rushed in first with massive humanitarian aid, helicopters, food, and rescue teams. That's the reality of the relationship. When Nepal stumbles, India is always the first responder. Without India, Nepal would face economic blockades, fuel shortages, and geopolitical vulnerability. It would be forced to lean heavily on China, but geography makes that far less practical, as trade routes are difficult through the Himalayas. Isolation, both economically and culturally, would leave Nepal fragile. In truth, India isn't just a neighbor for Nepal. It is the artery through which Nepal breathes, trades, and survives. 3. Bangladesh is often celebrated as one of South Asia's fastest growing economies. But here's the untold truth. Much of that growth is deeply tied to India. India is Bangladesh's biggest trade partner, supplying essential goods, raw materials, and market access. From textiles to agriculture, cross-border trade is a lifeline that sustains millions of jobs. On top of that, India provides Bangladesh critical transit routes, allowing Dhaka to connect with landlocked Nepal and Bhutan, and giving it access to broader markets. Energy is another hidden dependency. A significant chunk of Bangladesh's electricity grid is linked directly to India. India sells power to Bangladesh, and both countries are working on joint projects to ensure stable supply. Without Indian cooperation, Bangladesh would face blackouts that could cripple its industries and homes. Water is also key. The two nations share dozens of rivers, and water-sharing agreements with India are crucial for Bangladesh's agriculture and survival. Without Indian collaboration, floods or droughts could devastate the Delta nation. Security is another layer. India has helped Bangladesh fight terrorism and cross-border extremism, strengthening its internal stability. Military cooperation, intelligence sharing, and border management prevent extremist groups from gaining too much ground. Now, picture Bangladesh without India. Trade collapses, factories lose raw materials, and exports suffer. Power shortages plunge cities into darkness. Tensions over rivers turn agriculture into a crisis. And without India's security support, extremist threats could destabilize the nation further. Bangladesh's growth story is real, but it is intertwined with India's support. Without it, Bangladesh wouldn't just slow down, it would risk sliding back into instability. 2. Bhutan tucked away in the Himalayas. Bhutan is often called the land of happiness, but behind its peaceful image lies a hidden reality. Bhutan's survival and prosperity are deeply tied to India. Economically, India is Bhutan's largest donor and trade partner. Virtually all of Bhutan's major imports, from food, grains to fuel, come through India. Without this access, Bhutan would face shortages that could destabilize its fragile economy. But the most critical link is hydropower. Bhutan sells most of its electricity to India, and this accounts for a huge portion of its national revenue. These joint hydropower projects not only provide clean energy, but also give Bhutan financial stability. On the security front, Bhutan depends on India like no other. The Indian Army literally defends Bhutan's sovereignty, especially in tense areas like the Doklam Plateau, where China has made territorial claims. In 2017, it was India's intervention that stopped Chinese road construction in disputed territory, protecting Bhutan's borders. Without India's backing, Bhutan would be extremely vulnerable to external pressure. Culturally, Bhutan and India share deep bonds. Buddhism links the two nations spiritually, and Indian teachers, films, and goods influence daily life in Bhutan. Indian scholarships also bring Bhutanese students to Indian universities, helping the small nation develop skilled professionals. Now, imagine Bhutan without India. Its economy would collapse, hydropower revenues would vanish, and essential supplies would dry up. Militarily, it would face overwhelming pressure from China, putting its sovereignty at risk. In short, Bhutan's independence is not just protected by its own policies, but guaranteed by India's support. 1. Maldives. When people picture the Maldives, they see stunning beaches, luxury resorts, and turquoise waters. But beneath the postcard image lies a nation whose stability depends heavily on India. Tourism is the lifeline of Maldives, and Indian tourists make up a significant share of arrivals. Flight connectivity with Indian cities keeps the tourism industry alive, bringing in vital foreign exchange. Beyond leisure, Indian businesses also invest in Maldivian hospitality and infrastructure, ensuring steady economic growth. India has also been the Maldives' first responder in every major crisis. When a tsunami struck in 2004, India was the first to send ships, aircraft, and humanitarian aid. When Mali faced a drinking water shortage in 2014, India airlifted tons of bottled water. During COVID-19, India sent vaccines and medical supplies before any other nation. This reliability has earned India a reputation as the Maldives' most trusted partner. Security is another critical pillar. The Maldives has a small defense force, but India provides military training, equipment, and even naval patrols to safeguard its vast maritime zone. With piracy, smuggling, and great power competition in the Indian Ocean, India acts as the shield that protects Maldivian sovereignty. Infrastructure and healthcare aid also flow steadily from India. From hospitals to schools and housing projects, India has financed and built facilities that touch everyday Maldivian lives. Without India, the Maldives would face an immediate security vacuum, making it vulnerable to domination by external powers, particularly China. Its economy would also suffer as tourist flows slowed and emergency lifelines disappeared. In essence, India is not just a partner for the Maldives, it's a safety net. Now that we've looked at Afghanistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and the Maldives, a clear pattern emerges. India is not just a regional giant for itself, but a backbone for its neighbors. Its role extends across multiple dimensions: economic lifelines, security guarantees, cultural bonds, and humanitarian aid. For some nations, like Nepal and Bangladesh, India is the artery of trade and energy. For others, like Bhutan and the Maldives, it is the shield that guards their sovereignty. And for Afghanistan, it has been the silent builder of hope. This interdependence also highlights how India's rise is not just about its own growth. As India becomes stronger, its neighbors become more stable. But if India were suddenly removed from the picture, the ripple effects would be devastating. Economies would collapse, security would weaken, and regional instability would spread far beyond South Asia. In many ways, India's power is not measured only in military might or GDP numbers. It is measured in how many nations rely on it just to function day to day. That reliance transforms India from a regional player into a pillar of the global order. So, let's recap. We explored 5 nations: Afghanistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and the Maldives, each of which is deeply dependent on India for survival. Whether it's through trade, energy, education, infrastructure, or military protection, India's presence has been the invisible thread holding these countries together. The final message is simple but powerful. India's strength is not just about what it achieves for itself, but how much of the world depends on it. That reliance shows that India's rise is not a future possibility, it is already shaping the present. Now, let us turn the question to you. Which of these countries do you think is the most dependent on India for survival? Is it Afghanistan, where aid and education shape the future? Nepal, whose trade arteries flow through India? Or the Maldives, which relies on India for both tourists and defense? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. And before you go, don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into global power shifts. Because next time, we Lines be exploring another explosive question: top 5 nations afraid of India's rise. You won't want to miss it. Perfect. Let's expand these final sections so the script is richer, more detailed, and comfortably over 3,200 plus words, while keeping the flow engaging for a YouTube audience. I'll deepen each section with more examples, context, and storytelling elements. High up in the Himalayas lies Bhutan, a country often admired for its unique philosophy of gross national happiness instead of GDP. On the surface, Bhutan looks self-sufficient, with serene mountains, prayer flags, and monasteries that symbolize independence. But in reality, Bhutan's survival and prosperity are inseparably tied to India. Economically, India is Bhutan's largest donor, trade partner, and investor. In fact, nearly 80% of Bhutan's imports come from India, everything from rice and wheat to medicine, oil, and manufactured goods. Without this steady flow, Bhutan would face food shortages and skyrocketing prices. But the most critical economic link is hydropower. Bhutan's fast-flowing rivers, harnessed with India's support, have been transformed into a renewable gold mine. Through bilateral agreements, India has funded and helped build massive hydropower plants that now generate electricity not just for Bhutan's domestic needs, but for export. Over 70% of Bhutan's electricity is sold to India, and the revenue from this trade makes up a major portion of Bhutan's government income. Without these projects, Bhutan's economy would collapse under the weight of limited industries and low export potential. Security is another dimension where India acts as Bhutan's shield. Bhutan does not maintain a large standing army capable of countering major threats. Instead, it relies on India for military training, strategic advice, and direct protection. The Indian Army and the Indian Military Training Team IMTRIT in Bhutan help safeguard the kingdom's sovereignty. The 2017 Doklam standoff was a striking example. China attempted to build a road in disputed Bhutanese territory, threatening Bhutan's security and India's own vulnerable Siliguri corridor. Bhutan could not resist China on its own, but India stepped in, deploying troops and preventing Chinese expansion. Without India's support, Bhutan would have been forced into silence or submission, undermining its territorial integrity. Beyond economics and security, there are deep cultural and spiritual ties. Buddhism connects the two nations, and Indian teachers, films, music, and festivals influence Bhutanese culture. Many Bhutanese students pursue higher education in Indian universities through government scholarships, returning home as doctors, engineers, and administrators who drive Bhutan's progress. Now, let's imagine Bhutan without India. The consequences would be devastating: economic collapse as hydropower sales vanish, food and fuel shortages due to blocked trade, territorial vulnerability against Chinese expansion, brain drain with fewer education opportunities abroad. Bhutan's global reputation as a happy nation is, in many ways, made possible by India's quiet yet powerful support. Without India, that happiness would quickly crumble into economic hardship and geopolitical vulnerability.